Everyone had been talking about it, and the buzz was impossible to ignore. The $5 Iraqi Dinar and $4 Vietnamese Dong were suddenly trending everywhere, and it seemed like the entire internet was obsessed. Social media posts were flooding timelines, flashy YouTube videos promised life-changing profits, and messages from friends and acquaintances claimed, almost urgently, that this was the opportunity of a lifetime. Every platform, every corner of the web seemed to be screaming the same thing: get in now before it's too late. The excitement was contagious. People were sharing screenshots of viral posts, showing charts with sharp upward spikes, and some even had fabricated images of bank accounts supposedly overflowing with money from these miraculous investments. It was tempting to believe it all, especially when the numbers looked so dramatic, and the rewards appeared within reach in just a few clicks. Those who had been cautious suddenly felt left behind, staring at the growing frenzy as others seemed to gain an edge they might never catch. There was a kind of pressure in the air, subtle but pervasive, pushing everyone to act quickly, to not miss out on what was being portrayed as the financial breakthrough of the century. The fear of missing out, the so-called FOMO, had taken hold, and people were making decisions faster than they ever had before, often without stopping to question whether the hype was grounded in reality. In living rooms across the country, individuals were gathering around laptops and smartphones, refreshing pages and checking updates. The promise of turning small investments into unimaginable wealth was intoxicating. A single post could convince someone that a few $100s today might multiply into thousands or even tens of thousands tomorrow. People saw others claiming they had already cashed in on these opportunities, often with screenshots that seemed legitimate, and they wanted that same success for themselves. Conversations shifted from casual chats about everyday life to intense debates about whether now was the right time to buy. Some friends warned about the risks, but their voices were drowned out by the avalanche of viral content promising rapid returns. Even those who had prided themselves on financial caution felt a tug in the direction of risk, swayed by the persuasive momentum of collective excitement. The feeling of urgency was almost physical, a pressure that made hesitation seem like a costly mistake. Social media algorithms did the rest, feeding users more posts similar to the ones they interacted with, creating a feedback loop that made the hype feel even more credible. In this environment, it was easy to forget critical thinking or research, and to get swept up in the emotional roller coaster of hope, fear, and excitement. Every notification became a heartbeat, every new message a whisper that maybe now was the moment to act. Meanwhile, the content itself was designed to maximize engagement. Videos were edited with dramatic music, charts flashing across the screen, and voices that sounded authoritative, insisting this was the only way to make a fortune. Comments underneath posts were filled with testimonials, some genuine, some fabricated, all creating an illusion of consensus and trustworthiness. Even those who approached the topic cautiously could feel their resolve weakening under the constant barrage of persuasive messaging. They saw the potential for sudden wealth and felt the pressure to act before the opportunity vanished. It was like watching a wave build on the horizon, the excitement, the fear, the desire, and feeling powerless to resist being pulled in with it. People were logging into investment accounts, opening new wallets, and transferring money almost instinctively, driven by a combination of hope and social proof. The digital world had created an ecosystem where skepticism was drowned out, where logic was overshadowed by the allure of quick gains, and where the line between fact and fiction became blurry. Every hour brought new claims of success, every post a new reason to believe that fortune was just a click away. The momentum felt unstoppable, as though everyone who didn't participate would miss out on the greatest financial opportunity of their lives. The combination of scarcity messaging, viral social proof, and the universal desire for wealth created a perfect storm of psychological pressure. Yet, beneath all this excitement, there was a subtle but important tension, one that few seemed to notice. While people were rushing to participate, the underlying realities of currency investment and international exchange rates were being largely ignored. The dinar and dong had histories, economic contexts, and market limitations that were complex and often misunderstood. Anyone who tried to slow down and research the details quickly realized that the situation was far more nuanced than the sensationalized posts suggested. But in the heat of viral hype, these details were inconvenient. The narrative of instant wealth was far more appealing than the dry explanations of financial markets. Consequently, millions were swept up in a shared illusion, driven by the combination of social validation, fear of missing out, and the seductive power of viral content. People were not only investing money, but also emotional energy, hope, expectation, and dreams of a future dramatically altered by sudden gains. These emotions created an almost tangible environment, a collective mood that seemed to reinforce itself with every shared post, every comment, every viral video. It was as if the internet itself had become a living entity, guiding people toward a decision they might not have made in a calmer, more rational state. In homes, offices, and cafes, conversations about everyday life were increasingly interrupted by discussions about the dinar and dong. Friends nudged each other with warnings and excitement. Coworkers whispered about opportunities, and family members debated the likelihood of success late into the night. Even casual observers found themselves drawn into the conversation, unable to resist checking the latest posts or comparing charts. The hype had reached a level where it seemed almost omnipresent, unavoidable, and inexorably convincing. People were no longer just observers, they were participants in a social experiment of collective anticipation and desire. The psychological pull was immense, and for many, it outweighed caution, reason, or skepticism. In this environment, decisions were made rapidly, sometimes impulsively, and often without full understanding of the risks involved. The excitement was intoxicating, the promise irresistible, and the pressure to act unrelenting. The narrative of rapid, life-changing wealth had become a powerful force shaping thoughts, actions, and even dreams in real time. As the hype grew, the digital world seemed to pulse with possibility, every message, video, and post amplifying the sense that this was the opportunity of a lifetime, and anyone not paying attention risked being left behind forever. The reality behind the $5 Iraqi dinar and $4 Vietnamese dong hype was far more complex than most people realized. While the internet was ablaze with claims of overnight fortunes and miraculous returns, experts and experienced investors were shaking their heads quietly, warning that what was being presented as opportunity was, in fact, a minefield of misinformation. The so-called success stories, the screenshots of bank accounts overflowing with funds, and the charts with sharp, vertical spikes were all carefully crafted illusions designed to lure people in. Some of the posts were exaggerated, some completely fabricated, but all shared a single purpose: to trigger emotion over reason, making the possibility of instant wealth seem tantalizingly real. For those who were swept up in the excitement, these illusions created a dangerous cognitive trap. People were not just being misled, they were being psychologically manipulated into believing that acting quickly was the only way to secure a fortune. The very structure of social media amplified this effect, feeding users content similar to what they had already engaged with, reinforcing beliefs and drowning out skepticism. The hype didn't just exist in isolation. It thrived in a carefully constructed ecosystem that made doubt feel like a mistake, and caution seem like fear of missing out. In reality, the chances of a dinar or dong leap to $5 or $4 were astronomically low. Currency values are influenced by a complex web of factors: geopolitical stability, economic policies, global trade, and market confidence. These are not numbers that can surge overnight simply because of viral videos or social media posts. Anyone attempting to understand the market quickly discovers the layers of regulation and practical limitations that make the promises of instant wealth unrealistic. Yet, these details were inconvenient for those propagating the hype. Long explanations about inflation rates, trade deficits, and economic growth were boring and rarely shared widely. They didn't generate viral attention. In contrast, stories of someone making thousands overnight did. These narratives played perfectly into human psychology. The desire for wealth is universal, and people are hardwired to notice and react to potential gains. Scammers and overenthusiastic promoters knew this and used it to their advantage, framing the dinar and dong as magical solutions to financial struggles. By presenting selective information, ignoring the complexities, and creating a sense of urgency, they ensured that people acted emotionally rather than rationally. As the hype intensified, forums and social media groups became echo chambers where critical voices were drowned out. Comments praising quick gains dominated threads, while skeptics were often ignored, dismissed, or even mocked. Individuals who tried to step back and ask probing questions found themselves labeled as pessimists or fearmongers. The collective enthusiasm created a social pressure that was difficult to resist. Even those who considered themselves cautious or financially savvy felt their judgment clouded by the intensity of the conversation around them. Peer pressure, social validation, and fear of missing out combined to create an environment where irrational decisions felt justified. The promise of joining a winning group that had supposedly cracked the secret to sudden wealth was more compelling than warnings from financial experts or factual reports. Human psychology played a central role here. The hope of extraordinary reward often outweighs the acknowledgement of risk, and the hype machine had mastered that dynamic perfectly. Unfortunately, the consequences of this mass excitement were real and tangible. People were investing money they could not afford to lose, believing that the risk was minimal because of the overwhelming social proof. Entire savings accounts were transferred into purchases of currency notes that might never reach the inflated values promised. Some bought in large quantities, hoping that even if only a small portion of the rumors were true, they would still walk away with significant profit. Others were guided by persuasive online personalities whose confidence and polished presentations created an illusion of authority. Every post, video, and testimonial served to reinforce the idea that hesitation equaled missed opportunity. Yet, beneath all of this, the fundamental truth remained unchanged. There were no guarantees, no secret market movements waiting to reward the unsuspecting investor. The spike in price was largely a fantasy, a story crafted to manipulate emotions and exploit dreams. Those who fell for it often discovered this harsh reality too late, after money had been spent and expectations had been shattered. The spread of misinformation also relied on selective storytelling. Individuals were often shown only the rare examples of success and never the countless stories of loss. The few who may have seen gains did so under highly specific circumstances that were not replicable for the average investor. In most cases, the numbers were manipulated, taken out of context, or entirely fictional. The illusion of widespread success created a dangerous environment where normal caution was replaced with reckless optimism. People were encouraged to ignore logic, to trust virality over facts, and to act before fully understanding the situation. The combination of scarcity tactics, exaggerated testimonials, and curated visuals formed a psychological trap so convincing that even those familiar with financial principles could be swept away. The hype created an atmosphere of inevitability, as if everyone else was profiting and the only way to avoid being left behind was to invest immediately, no questions asked. This pressure, combined with a fear of regret, made rational thinking difficult. Emotional decision-making replaced careful analysis, and with each new post or video, the cycle of excitement and anticipation repeated itself, drawing in more participants. As the situation unfolded, it became clear that the viral claims were more about perception than reality. The narratives built around the dinar and dong were carefully constructed to manipulate desire, exploiting common human vulnerabilities. Scammers and overenthusiastic promoters took advantage of the lack of financial literacy among ordinary people, knowing that most would not question the numbers or investigate the legitimacy of claims. The more hype grew, the more people were drawn in, and the cycle fed on itself. For those paying attention, it became evident that the real investment being made was not in currency at all, but in the emotional energy of hope, anticipation, and belief. The few lucky stories circulated widely, while the vast majority of participants remained unaware of the risks until reality hit. Social media had created the perfect environment for this phenomenon, where emotion outweighed reason, and viral content created a false sense of security and inevitability. Those who fell for the hype did so not because they were foolish, but because the messaging was expertly designed to trigger their most basic instincts: the desire for wealth, the fear of missing out, and the hope of a better future. By the time the hype had reached its peak, many people were already deeply invested, both financially and emotionally, in the illusion of instant wealth. They had poured money into the Dinar and Dong, convinced that the viral posts and insider tips were undeniable proof that massive gains were imminent. The fear of missing out had grown into an obsession, and for many, the thought of hesitation felt like a personal failure. They had sacrificed not just money, but hours of research, sleep, and mental energy, all chasing a promise that was largely constructed to manipulate them. The online environment had created an almost hypnotic atmosphere where social proof reigned supreme. Every notification seemed like a signal of opportunity. Every new post a confirmation that the dream was within reach. Even those who had once been skeptical found themselves checking prices compulsively, comparing notes and calculating what-if scenarios, unable to resist the gravitational pull of collective excitement. The illusion had become so powerful that it overshadowed reason, and critical thinking had been replaced by anticipation, hope, and a persistent whisper that maybe, just maybe, this time the story was real. As time went on, the reality of market mechanics began to intrude, but for many, it was too late. The promised leaps to $5 or $4 were not materializing, and the excitement that had once seemed boundless began to show cracks. People noticed that the fluctuations in the Dinar and Dong were minor, incremental, and entirely consistent with normal currency behavior. Far removed from the explosive gains they had been led to expect, the charts that had once dazzled them now appeared misleading, manipulated, or taken out of context. The testimonials and stories that had inspired trust started to look questionable under scrutiny. Many investors realized that they had been relying on curated narratives rather than facts. Some attempted to sell their holdings, only to find that the market was illiquid, the process complicated, and the returns far smaller than the hype had suggested. The excitement and anticipation that had driven them to act so quickly now collided with the reality of slow-moving, regulated financial systems. The disappointment was compounded by a sense of betrayal, a recognition that the very platforms and communities that had fueled their hope had also contributed to their confusion and loss. The psychological impact of this realization was profound. People who had invested with optimism now had to confront feelings of regret, embarrassment, and frustration. They questioned their judgment, their trust in viral content, and their willingness to act on emotion rather than logic. Many shared their experiences online, warning others, but these voices were often drowned out by the continued noise of the hype. The lessons were clear. The allure of rapid wealth, especially when amplified by social media, can cloud judgment and lead to decisions that are inconsistent with long-term financial stability. What had initially seemed like a harmless opportunity to capitalize on a trending topic became a cautionary tale about human vulnerability to hype, social proof, and persuasive storytelling. Those who survived the experience intact, either financially or psychologically, often did so because they paused, questioned the narrative, and sought out reliable sources, even in the midst of overwhelming excitement. For others, the lesson was learned the hard way, leaving a lasting impression about the importance of critical thinking and self-discipline in the face of viral persuasion. The ripple effects extended beyond the immediate financial loss. Relationships were affected as family members and friends argued about whether the investment was wise or reckless. Social circles were split between those who had benefited from minor gains or simply avoided losses, and those who had been caught up in the frenzy. Conversations that once revolved around everyday life were now dominated by speculation, debate, and analysis of what had gone wrong. People who had been casual observers felt a newfound wariness of viral trends, developing a habit of questioning extraordinary claims and seeking verified information before taking action. The hype had served as a social experiment, revealing the powerful ways in which collective belief, emotional manipulation, and persuasive storytelling can influence behavior. Those who reflected on their experience recognized that the allure of instant wealth had been carefully engineered, designed to exploit hope and fear simultaneously. The dinar and dong had become symbols not just of potential financial gain, but of the human tendency to prioritize desire over discernment, to follow momentum rather than reason, and to trust the appearance of credibility over its substance. Over time, the story of the $5 dinar and $4 dong transformed from an active frenzy into a cautionary tale shared across online communities, financial blogs, and social media posts. Experienced investors used it to illustrate the dangers of viral hype and the importance of due diligence. Educational resources highlighted the need to understand market fundamentals, assess risks realistically, and maintain emotional control when confronted with seemingly extraordinary opportunities. People who had once been caught in the whirlwind of excitement became advocates for measured, informed decision-making, sharing their experiences to prevent others from making similar mistakes. The narrative shifted from "this is your chance to get rich overnight" to "here is what you need to know before you get swept up in the hype." In this sense, the experience, though painful for many, became an invaluable lesson in financial literacy, critical thinking, and the psychology of decision-making under pressure. Ultimately, the key takeaway was clear: hype and viral content can be seductive, but reality is not dictated by social media trends. The dinar and dong did not magically become $5 and $4 notes. The promise of instant wealth was largely an illusion. The only real gains were in understanding human behavior, recognizing the power of persuasive messaging, and developing strategies to resist impulsive decisions. People learned that careful research, skepticism, and patience are far more valuable than chasing a viral opportunity, and that protecting oneself from emotionally charged hype is as important as any financial strategy. Those who internalized this lesson emerged stronger, wiser, and better equipped to navigate the unpredictable currents of online trends and investment opportunities. The story of the $5 dinar and $4 dong remained a vivid reminder that critical thinking, discipline, and awareness are the ultimate safeguards against falling for promises that seem too good to be true.